And welcome to Border Communities Art Organizing in the Zone. This is a panel that we put together as part of this field trip. Most of you are a part of. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making the trip down here. How many of you is this the first time in the border area? Yeah? Well, in this border. Yeah.
This building.
Oh, in this building it is. Well, welcome, and we're glad that you're taking a chance to come over here, and tomorrow we'll have fun across the border in Juárez. But tonight we wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to organize across a border and what it means to work across borders through art. And in order to do that, we invited a couple of people, three people, Diego from el Museo de Arte de Ciudad Juárez. He is the director of el Museo de Arte de Ciudad Juárez. I'll do more proper introductions in a little bit when they speak. Gabriela Muñoz, who's joining us from Phoenix. She currently has an exhibition at MOCA Tucson. And Gris Muñoz, originally from Guadalupe, across the border in the Valle de Juárez. We're both Vallejuarenses. I'm very proud of her. And of sharing Valle de Juárez roots with her. And currently in El Paso, or
yep.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit. My name is León de la Rosa. I'm an art professor at Ciudad Juárez, Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juárez. And I work in various instances and collaborate with various places, like the Rubin Center. Thank you very much, Carrie Doyle, for letting us host this panel here at the Rubin Center. It's always a great place to be. And I would like to tell you a little bit about kind of the driving force behind the trip is 516 Arts, but also, thank you, Suzanne, she's here, but also Desierto Mountain Time, which I don't know how many of you are familiar with Desierto Mountain Time, but this is a constellation of art organizations that started kind of just sharing information, sharing resources, trying to support each other around when the pandemic first hit. We sort of weren't able to go visit anybody else, so we started getting together at the behest of Suzanne. She started bugging us through email, like, let's get together. And we did, and over the last couple of years, it's been growing into something like this. And it's always shape-shifting. We don't have a very specific goal in mind except just supporting each other. And that's a great goal to have in mind. And so that's Desierto Mountain Time. And one of the partners of Desierto Mountain Time, who I work with a lot, is el Fondo de Arte Transfronterizo, or the Transborder Art Fund. And what we do at the Transborder Art Fund is that we came up with an idea to start supporting art projects that benefit specific communities in the border area, specifically in the Juárez or Paso border area. The Transborder Art Fund was first initiated after Border Tuner, an art installation that occurred right here in the border by Rafael Lozano-Hemmer. He installed huge searchlights that could be used as bridges for people to communicate. And during that period of time, a Juárez artist, Janae asked Rafael what was he leaving behind for artists in the area to work with. And what he left behind originally were $10,000 for us to start this fund. Carrie Doyle and myself and Janet, who's not here right now, we set up the fund. We created this manifesto, and that you can visit online, transborderartfund.wordpress.org, or you can just go to the Desierto Mountain website and you'll find the link there. We created this manifesto that states what we're interested in. And we're interested in supporting art projects that show commitment to both sides of the border. Somehow, somewhere, there should be a commitment. That's what we decided transborder truly means. It doesn't mean having a Hispanic last name. It doesn't mean being bilingual. It means having commitments on both sides of the border. And what those commitments are, that varies from project to project. We also created this fund in order to support artists, or knowing that many of the artists that we were going to support would not be able to cross the border, either because of lack of documentation or because they just chose not to. And so in order to kind of bridge that gap, we made a commitment that if artists were not able to have a peer across the border, we would put them in touch with somebody that we felt could work with them. And finally, we made a commitment to support mainly and primarily artists that, from communities and life experiences that were underrepresented or traditionally underrepresented in contemporary art. So basically, people that kind of didn't look like me, you know, and those were the people that needed to be supported. We gave out the first $10,000 during the first year of pandemic. We ran out of money, and then we started looking for new funds to keep going. At this moment, we are initiating a process with the Mellon Foundation. They have invited us to apply for a grant with the Mellon Foundation, which could possibly support the existence of the Transborder Art Fund for the next couple of years. So we're super excited about that. And, but I mean, we're still like in that process. If that happens, that's going to be a very happy moment for all of us here. And in the first, and we also have partnered with the El Paso del Norte Community Foundation to serve as our fiscal sponsor here in El Paso. Originally, it was basically housed here in the Rubin Center. But it was very important for both Carrie and myself for the fund to be independent, and especially to be independent of the United States. So not only do we need to get it out of UTEP and of the Rubin Center, but also we need to get it across the border and set it up in Juárez specifically. We're not there yet, but we're working on it. But that is very definitely our final objective. During the first edition of El Fondo de Arte Transfronterizo, and by the way, Spanish will be spoken because when you are trying to collaborate in the border, Spanish is an integral part. Included work by Jorge Escobar and Paco Burrola called Bright Lights, Luces Brillantes, who are actually preparing a show at the Museo de Arte Ciudad Juárez in 2023? 2023. In 2023. So already kind of like the tentacles of the Cierto Mountain Times start kind of working around, you know. We also supported, and this is a series of video profiles on people from the LGBTQ community in Chihuahua, kind of giving them visibility and working with them to create their own video profiles. It's always a very collaborative effort that Paco and Jorge engage in. We also supported a short film by Alejandra Aragon called Scatas. Alejandra Aragon, by the way, has a solo show right outside this door called Errata, which I recommend highly. It's a beautiful show, and she's a great artist from across the border with a very important experience and a very important voice to share. We also supported work by Miguel Ángel Mendoza, who works with poetry and spoken word. And he is working on something called El Cubo de Resonancia. I'm sorry, this is Nómada. Nómada is working with, the project by Nómada is called The Responsible Return, which had to do with working public spaces after the pandemic and making them responsible in terms of social distancing and whatnot. We also supported Adriana Montenegro with a piece called Cicatriz Sonata, which has, it's a performance piece that they created in collaboration with artists from El Paso and other places in Texas that had to do with the border. We also supported Cubo de Resonancia by Manuel Herrera, which is, originally it was meant to be a box that Manuel Herrera is building for people to come in and learn about spoken word, learn about self-representation through poetry. This was before COVID-19. In the midst of COVID-19, that became a death trap to catch COVID-19. Imagine being trapped inside of a box. So, and speaking loudly into each other's faces. So that had to change. And that's something that we're very proud of in the Transborder Art Fund, and that he has spoken, and many artists have spoken about it in those terms, that we understand that art changes, and that plans change, and projects need to shift, and we still support those, you know. We are not making them commit to whatever project they first started with. And we also supported a work called Geotestimonix by Gris Muñoz and Sylvia, their partner, who is not here right now, and which Sylvia can tell us, I'm sorry, Griselda can tell us a lot more. So now I'll let you be, Griselda.
Hi, thank you very much for being here. Thanks to Carrie Doyle for always hosting us in the Rubin Center. And thank you, León, for inviting me. This is our project. It's called Geotestimonix Transborder Art. And it is a collaboration between myself, Gris Muñoz, I'm an author, poet, biographer, and Dr. Sylvia Fernandrez. She's a digital humanist. And this project, of course, was born through the Transborder Art Fund. At the time, this was right before COVID, like León was saying, and was inspired by Rafael Lozano-Hemmer's, just mentioned the name, Border Tuner, sorry. And so essentially, in order to apply for this project, it had to be that there was one person on each side of the border. And you know, I'm a poet, I'm a writer, and I collect narrative. I'm also working on the biography of an acclaimed LA artist by the name of Fabian Deborah, out of homeboy industry fame and Father Gregory Boyle and all that. So I'm here in El Paso. This is my book. It's called Guadalupe Girl. It's a bilingual collection of poetry and short stories based out of my life. It's kind of like nonfiction, creative nonfiction, and it won, well, it didn't win, but it was a finalist for an award by the Texas Institute of Letters. So I'm here in El Paso. I'm a working writer, wanting to create something new, very much a community-based writer, because I started off as a performance poet. And anyone that is a performance poet is super community, you know, community-based. But I did that in my 20s, and kind of as I got older, I became a mother. I stopped performing as much and started really working on the literary side of creating. So here we have this idea for a project that collects women's stories. I mean, it's something so simple, right? Geotestimonix Transborder Art is a binational project intended to collect the stories of women from both sides of the border. And of course, when we say women, we mean anyone who identifies as a woman. And so much because these are the stories that have always been marginalized, right? Personally speaking, my mother worked in a factory. Like León said, my mother and father come from a very tiny town outside of Juárez called Guadalupe. And my mother used to cross over, and she was a domestic worker, you know, from the age of 15, and my father was a farm worker since the age of 8. So these are not people who were raised to be artists, right? So I grew up very much first generation, and the idea of collecting narratives and collecting stories, this is just not something that I grew up with, right? And so the idea that we lose so many stories. We lose so many of our grandmother's stories, our great-grandmother's stories. We have lost millions of stories simply because these women their stories were not prioritized ever. and really as a writer, I can tell you that if you don't prioritize your own story, it's going to be lost, right? And so I knew that I wanted to work on something that had to do with words, that had to do with stories, that had to do with, but I wasn't exactly sure, and I reached out to Dr. Sylvia Quintanilla, and I actually originally thought she was a writer. I thought it would be cool to have a project with another writer from Juárez. She said, no, I'm an academic, I'm actually a digital humanist. Started getting into what she did. So Sylvia, who is not here, she's currently at the University of Washington. She creates maps of different types of information, right? So it could be, and it's very decolonial because she creates maps of information that wouldn't usually be put on a map, or, you know, so you can see something like this, like maps of the femicidios in Mexico, right? That's a very, it's a jarring thing to be able to look at a map and then, you know, and actually click on locations where women have been found, and so, or there's a map in Mexico of women writers, you know, el mapa de mujeres escritoras contemporáneas, and so there's maps of different types of information because usually the types of information that are collected are not collected by people of color, and so who gets to decide what goes on a map? Not us, right? And so, like, let's, you know, so this is where we're changing it. This is where we're saying we're going to create maps of different types of information, and Sylvia was all about it. So literally, she creates a website. It's connected. It could be connected to Google Maps, or it could not be. It could be independent, and it literally has points on the map that somebody can click on. And so that's the whole point. Is we're working towards this website, which will be, you know, fully functioning website that'll have the map and it'll have an interactive display of women's stories and the way that we're mapping them
the west, the one partner that kind of like falls away from El Rio Bravo is Tucson, Arizona, especially MOCA Tucson. And, were you able? Oh, thank you, Gary. And the first talk is Eduardo Man? Oh, I was going to reference him. Okay.
He's still in your shot.
Okay. Well, during our first talk, that we had a Zoom conversation presenting Desierto Mountain Time. And I was going to reference him because Eduardo actually challenged us about the lack of participation from Arizona, which was something that was important because Arizona is very much part of the borderlands. And we definitely wanted to make sure that in this conversation about art organization across borders, we had somebody from Arizona. And we do. Gabriela Muñoz, please take it away.
Thank you so much for the invitation. My heart was palpitating. Just thank you for sharing. That project's incredible. Thank you for the wonderful company. I'm here sort of representing a large group of women. So I was born actually in Nuevo Casas Grandes, Chihuahua, not to be confused with the old Casas Grandes, okay? I actually immigrated to Phoenix, Arizona in 1993 and lived undocumented for over a decade. So talk about the stories you don't tell, right?
Right.
It's such dangerous information.
Yes.
And so stories about women, about brown women, have always been really important to me. And my port of entry was Douglas, Arizona. The port of entry is the border point where you cross in and out of a country. And I met this incredible artist, Janae Sanchez, in grad school, who became like an important collaborator in my artistic trajectory. So Janae happens to be from Douglas, Arizona. And so we sort of talk a lot about we must have crossed so many times without, we would reference streets and stores that are now closed. Because she grew up there and I crossed through there. And so later on, we started doing work together about being fronterizas, about being border dwellers. About, I would say probably 6 years ago now, we were invited to an exhibition that was at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, and it was about women in power. And so we really sort of struggled with that idea. We were trying to think about what does it actually mean, right? And she had been invited to do work with this incredible colectiva called Dougla Prieta Trabajan. So it's Dougla Prieta is an amalgamation of Douglas and Agua Prieta, which is the city that borders it. So it's this incredible collective that's been active for about 15 years in different iterations. And the colectiva functions under the premise of dignity, and they sort of rebuke the idea of, what's that word? Hand-me-downs. They work for what they have. They do what we call peer-to-peer learning, right? They just call it Tuesday afternoon. They teach each other things. They have English classes. They have an incredible community garden where they do permaculture, which to them, they define permaculture as year-round harvesting. They grow foods that are pesticide-free, that are, region appropriate. And they got together initially. They would meet together, and then at one point, the man who owned the hall said that they were starting to earn some money out of their embroidery and the things they were making, so the rent was hiked up and they couldn't afford to meet there anymore. So they live in this, this sort of colonia on the outskirts of Agua Prieta called Colonia Ladrillo, Colonia Ladrillera, so everyone makes bricks, that's what they do, whole families. And so the women got together and they decided, well, you know what? We're just gonna get together with our neighbors. We're gonna make bricks and we're gonna build our hall. And we thought, Janae and I were like, that is power. To get together with your neighbors, to work with mud and build your own building because you can't afford rent, like that is badass, right? That is like female power. And so we were just so like in awe of these women who looked like our tias, who looked like our moms, like our, like our grandma. I mean, I'm not gonna say grandmas because if they see this, they're gonna be like, we ain't that old. But so these are them. These are the core women we've been working with for about 6 years now. So initially we did these portraits of them. We commissioned 300 bricks, and then we immigrated the bricks into Arizona, and then we printed their portraits onto the bricks, and we performed. We wanted to honor their labor by performing the labor in the museum gallery. So we installed this 30-foot long piece of their faces. And as the years went by, we would go down and do work with them periodically. Like they taught us how to make chicken soup, so we made a video about them. Because we wanted, by then, Janae and I both had children. And so we wanted our kids to like have some connection. And so, they came with us and we learned how to make chicken. You would learn how to like kill the chicken, like pluck the chicken, the whole thing, right? And then of course they have like their community gardens, so we could just go harvest some of that food. And one of the ways in which the colectiva is economically self-sufficient is that they receive groups and then they'll cook for them and they'll teach them what it means to have a community garden, and then they'll charge per plate. And so the colectiva is self-sufficient. So we applied and received this grant at the U of A Confluence Center, I think probably almost 2.5 years ago. And we were gonna go and do workshops with the women, and we were gonna do oral histories with them, because they told us, all these groups come, all these universities come and they do videos of us, and then we never get to see them, and they take our stories.
Oh, yeah.
And we thought, well, what if we did oral histories with you and they remained with you? So we got the grant, and then COVID hit, and so we were like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? So we just went virtual, and we were able to, through the grant funds, we were able to buy equipment so that the women had computers set up in the center. We paid for their internet for a couple of years. And then we bought camera equipment that we shipped. And the women did end up doing oral histories, and then we applied for another grant through the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture. And for that grant, we really started, because we were just able to meet with them, right? I live in Phoenix, which is like a 5-hour drive from the border. And Janae lived in Douglas at the time. But it was so much easier to just jump on a Zoom. Like that was something that was really beautiful about the way that we were forced to meet virtually. Yeah. And the women could jump in on their mobile phone. Yeah. And so we actually started doing collective budgeting. So then we started setting our grant budgets together. Then it wasn't me and Janae, artists, doing work for them. It was the whole group, right, saying, well, what do you guys need? And the women saying, well, we need sewing machines because we're doing workshops. And they wanted open pollinated seeds so they could plant and then harvest seeds for the next year. So we were able to do that. And then we bought more equipment, more camera equipment for them. And we were invited to do a couple of exhibitions that really sort of changed our relationship with the women and the ways in which we invited them to be artists. So for an exhibition at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, Janae and I were invited to curate an exhibition in that space and then to create new work. And we said, we'll do it, but we have actually 8 collaborators that we want to invite. And we each need to be paid equally, and y'all need to figure out how to pay artists in Mexico. And they did. They were an incredible partner. And so for that exhibition, the women, because we had done their portraits, we thought, like, you know, that's our interpretation of them, but what if Doña Eugenia could, like, take her own photograph? Like, what would that look like? And so they did. We did these virtual workshops with them. We taught, you know, we went over lighting and 2D design, and they paired into groups, and they did these incredible photographs. And then they said, well, if we're gonna do self-portraits, y'all need to do self-portraits. And so Janae and I did self-portraits for the first time, which was deeply uncomfortable, but it was like a great experience. And then, those are their portraits. And then for the MOCA Tucson exhibition, they were like such an incredible collaborator and partner. They commissioned videos from the women. So then the women, the premise of the exhibition centers around nurturing and what does it mean to nurture each other and nurture community in the midst of COVID, which has been really difficult. And so the women did video kind of portraits about experiences that have nurtured them or how they have like sustained themselves in nurturing their community and each other. Doña Eugenia and her daughter, Doña Eugenia taught us how to make chicken soup, and we made this beautiful piece. And then she did a video with her daughter, and I'm like, well, thanks for making my video piece obsolete, because her piece was like so amazing and incredible. And then a lot of my work, I'm a printmaker by training, so a lot of my work has to do with print processes and documenting in that way. So my work, I make my own ink, and so we printed their portraits onto that wall because we've been trying to get them to come, and we finally had enough money for visas. We secured that through grant funding, but the border has been closed, and you know, they presence themselves through their videos and their own work, but we still wanted to just remind ourselves, for me and Janae, to remember that, you know, they're still not here. So we made, we render their portraits. That's just earth and breast milk on the wall, and that's their medium. Yeah. So it's all about like women and collaboration and stories. I love you. I know. I'm like, you're Muñoz and I'm Muñoz. How are we not related? We're together now. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. And lastly, we would not be able to talk about border collaborations here in El Paso without having somebody from the Museo de Arte Ciudad Juárez, and we're lucky enough to have the director. El Museo de Arte Ciudad Juárez, and he'll tell you more about it. Yes, oh, yeah. Sorry, there needs to be a switch. I need to add it for a little bit here. El Museo de Arte Ciudad Juárez is one of the very few museums in Mexico that belongs to the INVAL. El INVAL is similar to the kind of like the National Endowment for the Arts, somewhat similar in the Mexican side. And it's one of those museums that is not in Mexico City. It's very far from Mexico City. And as such, it's always last in line for budgets, for programming, for interests, for everything. And Diego does a wonderful job of maintaining it and running it and programming it. And during COVID, during the pandemic, as far as I can tell, they were one of the most successful places to keep programming going online in a very kind of rich and significant way. And without further ado, well, Diego.
Thank you. Well, my English is not so good like my sisters here, so sorry. Well, I'm going to try because we have a crowd here, so I'm going to do my best. Sorry. And I wrote all this because, like you know. Well, we are working. Well, for our project was supported by the 2020 William Bullock Prize granted by the USC Fisher Museum of Art, Museo Universitario de Arte Contemporáneo of the UNAM, and Palabra de León, Mexico. For the art, Cartographies and Narratives of Migration is a collective art project developed by a group of migrant asylum seekers impacted by the Return to Mexico program or migrant projection protocols, and sheltered in Casa de Acogida in Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua. Beginning in 2019, Ciudad Juárez began to receive a migratory wave of thousands of Central American citizens seeking asylum in the United States of America. Many of them have been returned to the country of transit and located to wait for their asylum application in Mexico. The volume of migration and hasty patchwork of federal, state, and national policies have resulted in an overnight crisis in the city infrastructure, and social services quickly became overwhelmed. Civic groups such as non-profit civil associations like Juntas Vamos began to organize networks of assistance to aid in the humanitarian crisis, which has been continuously evolving to this day. Having founded Casa de Acogida, a migrant shelter, the group has also developed a livelihood project called Proyecto Trabajo, like work project, that teaches the craft of embroidery and provides opportunity for members of the shelter. Collectively, the group embroiders have made canvas bags, which are then sold through support networks in Mexico and the United States. Proceeds from the sales go directly to the artists, with a small portion going towards the purchase of the new materials. This initiative not only generates financial support for members of the group, but also provides a means for expression and coping, providing meaning during an uncertain and, in then, an underfined wait. Upon concluding a research project on Ciudad Juárez, postcards from the border are these two guys, Gabriela and Angela. They are from, Gabriela is from Chile and Angela is from Philippines. And they were in Juárez visiting us, and they have a project about postcards from the migrants, and they were working in that project. So, postcards from the border, they start to developing an online store for Juntas Vamos. And both of those guys are architects and are urban designers. And they propose a collaboration with Juntas Vamos and Museo de Arte Ciudad Juárez to initiate the development of virtual projects and collaborative workshops. These initiatives has come together in the joint project called the Cartographies of Migration. The project is an initiative and as a transdisciplinary creative laboratory, and in close collaboration with MOCA and a group of professionals from the disciplines of urban design, art, pedagogy, and anthropology. Participants are provided a space to narrate, draw, and expand on their experiences through embroidery. Embroidery will be explored as a narrative tool to trace the spatial territorial perspectives in the migrant experience, as well as the personal journey of those who are currently in the shelter. Well, this is a map of Ciudad Juárez. We can look here for a few Casa Migrantes of shelters that are in Juárez. And the group is here in Anapra. They live in Casa de Acogida. The museum is like, I know it's not in this map, sorry, but they also have a work in La Catedral. All these migrants are really helped by the churches in Juárez, and they are always looking for asylum. And in one of the talks, they always remember that the places, they don't remember the name of the city, but they remember the name of the church that they help. So it's really important for them when one of the first remember things is not the city, it's not the name of the person, but maybe the name of the father or the people that share a hand to them. So this stories interviewing will form the narrative context for a collective creation built on the various experiences that we will uncover through an artistic process. The collective creation will be rendered in a cartography perspective so that individual experiences of the migrant journey can become visible within common territory. A territory populated by cultural, natural, and social landscapes whose reference, like flora, fauna, faces, geographies, etc., provide shape and form to migrant narratives and generate the cartography for a shaded experience. The workshops will focus on expanding the creative and expressive abilities of the group, which will ultimately design the final collective work and exhibition of the MOCA Tucson, the museum. This process will be documented and shared on online platforms and to raise public awareness. Most members of the embroidery group are women with children who have joined caravans of Central American migrants and undertook the dangerous journey to Mexico. Another of the things that happened when we start working in this project was COVID. Like every of us have to deal, and we start to have like these meetings online and Zoom, and we try to know the people. It was really difficult for us to try to know someone in the Zoom way, in the virtual, and it was really hard that sometimes they were like embroidering and talking at the same time, and we were on the other side like hearing, but trying to copy everything and start to thinking about what we are going to work with. And another of the things that happened, it was this uncertain thing to happen with the budgets in Mexico. It was like, oh my goodness, anyone, any of the places, institutions, ACs and everything has a real budget because everything was cut down, shut down in the pandemic. So our price never came on time. So in those times, if you want to take another one, this is one of the first ideas that we have for the museum and the installations of the embroidery. Here are the bags that Juntas Vamos made with the group of migrants, but we want to talk about Casa de Acogida and the place where they were living and well, near of the border, and also all the trip that they made. All the bags that they made are relative with the things that they remember. It's like the iconic plants, iconic birds, iconic emblematic. Yeah, the most emblematic of the country. But these ones was like the first idea. These are evolving because also the group start to cross. They were in Juárez, estaban atorados.
They weren't stuck in Juárez anymore.
Yeah, they weren't stuck in Juárez, but then the policies and all these things changed. We didn't start to government, and a lot of those. That group, all of the first group that arrived in the Casa de Acogida could go to the place that they were waiting for in the United States. But now they are another challenge, that is when they came to the United States and realized that maybe the American dream is not the one that they waited for. Now they have another challenges like the work, and they are like they don't have any time to be asked to embroider, right? So it's muy difícil. It's really difficult for us to work with the first group. Sorry. Since then, Casa de Acogida has been receiving a lot of immigrants, and we are working with new people there. And this project has these difficulties, these challenges, because the people is not, we are not expecting to.
Dile que estás ocupado.
Yeah, after you.
They don't have like this. We first of all, we don't want that they stay in Juárez. It's like, no, if they have a dream, they have to follow that. But all these stories that we are collecting and we are asking permission to get to share, and some of those are really difficult and are really hard for us to hear, and also to share with the public. But one of those processes, like, this is the prize that we won. This is the challenges that we have at this moment: the COVID-19, delay in budget, the change in immigration status. This is the first time that, also 2 weeks ago, the first group, we were able finally to go to the museum and start seeing the place, start imagining what's going to be the exhibition, because all the work is in there. But we are not curating the exhibition, we are not seeing with the workshops, with the people that is now in the shelter. And well, it's like a work in progress. And I think that maybe, sorry if I don't explain a lot of things well, but these are the parts of the project: Postcards from the Border, Juntas Vamos AC, Grupo Enfoque, and also the museum. So, well, yeah, the project only has like three of the si quieres nada más ponerlo para que se vean las partes importantes del proyecto. ¿Dónde está el museo? Yeah. Okay, it's narrative workshops, embroidery, and critical museology workshops. In all of these three, we are immersed in like the talks, the embroidery. We are not saying them, hey, please do this. No. They have to make the time and also the imagination of what they want to share with us. So that's our project. Thank you. Sorry.
And so one thing that I would like to keep in mind as we close down with the presentations and open up for the questions and the conversation part of this is how each one of these projects embodies the commitment, right? Embodies a commitment to the people on the other side of the border, and how, because not only COVID happened, but along with COVID, the borders literally remained closed for close to 2 years. For anybody that wasn't essential, whatever that means. This is only my second or third time coming across the border in close to 3 years almost. And I'm somebody that used to come across the border basically every other day or maybe every week, as the phone keeps ringing. And each one of these of our wonderful presenters show those commitments, and how that commitment actually makes you figure out ways to continue that collaboration and to continue working even through closed borders, even through pandemics, and even through any other situation that may occur. And with that in mind, are there any questions that you would like to ask of any of our presenters? If not, I'm going to start asking you questions.
My question for you.
Yes.
The idea of having the narratives and then having the text files being used to kind of illustrate and bring out the stories, the narratives. What will be done with them? Will they just be presented in the museum, or what's the idea?
Well, they are using the writing to talk. They are like the writing is like the channel to process all the things that happen to them.
Yes.
It's like the therapy.
Yes.
The piece of embroidery that they are making, it doesn't have like a story. The story is telling by the time they are doing all that. So they are sharing their story, and the story is going to be accompanied by the embroidery. And one of the things that impacted me more it was like in the first embroideries that they made, you can see like they are blurry, but also you can see that there's a pattern of colors, a pattern of things, a pattern of, and those are the first ones when they arrive, when they get out of ice, so they have a lot of things to process. Maybe families separated, the son in another place, and being in Ciudad Juárez in a shelter that maybe is not the goal of this journey, and has like this impact and process to be healed. And the writing made me start to doing that. And also it's like a help of it, because they solve these bags, but well, they have to solve a good problem. So they have to have these workshops and learn how to embroider in a good way. But all the projects, bueno, como los primeros esbozos.
The first pieces that they embroidered?
Yeah, the first pieces are the ones that they collected for the project. So it's going to be the narrative process is one of the things, but the other is like all the exercise that they have made all the time. Yeah.
Entonces están mostrando más el proceso.
Sí, el proceso, pero también hay como ejercicios.
So they will show more of the process.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
The whole process is what's important here.
Yeah.
Not product.
Not the process, yeah, exactly.
Oh, interesting.
Are there any other questions?
Can you speak just briefly about the spelling of with a border?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's my question too.
Oh, sorry. Well, bordear is like, in Spanish, bordar is embroidery, but in English, border is the border. So it's like when we were talking about this project, like okay, están bordando el bordo.
That's beautiful.
So bordar el bordo es como bordear, and we think about this Spanish word about border and bordar is embroidery. So that's it. The amalgamation of the words.
Are there any other questions? Gris, Gabi, Diego, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I have another one I need to give you.
Oh, just go ahead. Don't worry about it.
For the narrative, for the stories. Obviously, the stories, they're going to be all different kinds of love. So some are going to be happy, but some are going to be very hard. How do you
for that question. Ultimately, I think